Alright, so it's been a while since I've reviewed a budget smartphone on the channel. And they've come a long way, right? So I decided to review one of these and just see how far they've come. So here's the Realme Narzo N55. Fun fact, Amazon and Realme have worked together on this device. So now for the money that you spend, along with the phone, you'll get a pre-applied screen protector, a 33-watt SUPERVOOC charger, a USB-A to Type-C cable, and of course an ejection pin. Now there is no protective case, so that's going to be an add-on expense, but the N55, it does have a few tricks up its sleeve. It's the first Narzo phone with a 90Hz refresh rate. It's also the slimmest Narzo phone. And then it has a 64 megapixel camera. It's got the option to add up to 6 gigs of virtual RAM and a 200% ultra volume mode. And it also has this mini capsule inspired from, the dynamic island on the iPhone 14 Pro series. But let's talk about all of this. Now let me first take you through the design. And I really think that this is a really good looking phone that's selling at about 10,000 rupees. The first thing you'll notice is the dual tone design and just how incredibly slim the phone is. I mean, it's really sleek, guys, and with those straight rectangular edges, the in-hand feel is nothing like a budget smartphone. Just by looking at the design, you're gonna say that this is about 20 or 25,000 rupees. There's also the headphone jack, so you can still enjoy music the way we had for so many years. The prime blue color, it looks phenomenal. A very fresh and cool color. There's also a black if you're interested, but I really recommend that you go with this one. It's really unique. Now, the entire body is plastic, right? The back almost gives you a glass look, but it is plastic. It's also pretty clever design. So when you hold the phone, your fingers typically touch here, which does not show fingerprints as much as the part above does, where you will really not touch as frequently. And obviously, this dual island look has got very popular. And do not think that this entire thing is the lens. That's just design, and we'll talk more about the camera and the samples a little later in the video. Also, it's got a fully loaded SIM tray, so you can have dual SIMs and expand storage by 1 terabyte by adding a micro SD card. This is not a 5G smartphone though, and here's what I'll recommend, that if you are spending money and if you can shell out just a bit more, just try to get yourself a 5G phone, because that way you're just a bit more future-proof. By the way, it has this physical fingerprint sensor on the side, which works like a charm. I very much prefer physical fingerprint sensors over in-display ones because they're just more accurate and fast. And of course, this does have face unlock too. Now, the bezels on this thing are quite thin. Of course, there's quite a bit of chin here at the bottom, but then even phones in higher price segments have that much. It's a 6.72-inch large display with an FHD plus resolution and a 90Hz refresh rate. The display has a peak brightness of 680 nits, which is sufficient. It's not extremely bright, but it's just about enough for you to be able to use outdoors without much difficulty. Watching content is good enough experience, as you could expect from a phone in this price segment. YouTube videos can be played in up to 2160p resolution, but it may lag a little if you chose that resolution. Now, while watching movies or TV shows, visually, no problem. But in terms of sound, I think a few things could have been improved. Now look, if you're going to be using earphones with this phone, absolutely no problem. But if you are going to be using the loudspeakers in this, couple of concerns. First, it doesn't have dual speakers, right? It's only the one speaker here. And so if you're trying to listen to something that is dialogue based, like an interview on YouTube, it may not sound very clear, especially if there's like a bit of noise around you. And second, the bass on this can be improved. Now there is an ultra boom sound mode that does increase the volume by a bit, but it's not that great. And so with this one, I would just say stick with earphones. Anyway, let's also try gaming on the phone and see how that works. So I started playing Call of Duty multiplayer first, and I could opt to upgrade to medium graphics and high frame rate, which isn't bad for a phone in this price segment. And as I played, the game looked pretty decent. It's definitely not very sharp and color rich, as you could expect in phones that cost about 20,000 rupees, but the gameplay was very comfortable. Even at medium graphics and high frame rate, the performance was smooth, response to touch was quite nice, and after a couple of rounds of non-stop gaming, I didn't really experience any heating. Now this phone is rocking the MediaTek G88 processor, and it's got 6 gigs of RAM, the variant that I have. And trust me when I say this, 6 gigs of RAM should be the minimum amount of RAM that you guys should also get for yourself, because 4 gigs is just not going to cut it. It's not future-proofing your phone. And at this price point, these kind of specs are just about enough for daily use. I mean, it's not going to give you super snappy experience. It will feel a little jittery somewhere or the other. But again, you want faster experience, try the more, premium lineup of Realme series. Now, one more thing, the 128 gigs of internal storage is eMMC type and not the UFS type. And that makes things like loading games or accessing photos and videos or opening up conversations that have a whole lot of chats, a whole lot of messages, just a bit slower. And so if you're someone who doesn't delete stuff, like you store a lot of photos and videos, or you don't delete chats, you're going to find that this phone will get slow over time. So you have to keep this very light and clean. Okay, now let's quickly talk about the software. So it's got Realme UI 4.0 and it's running on top of Android 13. It's not going to give you a super snappy experience. It will feel a little jittery somewhere or the other. But again, you want faster experience, try the more premium lineup of Realme phones in that case. So it's very similar to Oxygen OS 13 found on OnePlus devices, but the most annoying part is that this UI is full of recommendations, preloaded apps, and ads. And that's the one thing I think Realme can work on to position its devices a little better. All of this stuff, though, can be removed or disabled from within the UI. It's just a process that you have to go through at the time of setting up your phone. Despite being a budget smartphone though, it gives you all the cool stuff, like you can lock apps, hide apps, and even create a secure vault to keep your private photos, videos, and files. There are some cool ways to take screenshots and partial screenshots too. Now it supports dynamic RAM, so on top of 6 gigs you can add another 6 gigs of virtual RAM. You can even go into performance mode and opt for, more performance if required. Of course, it would be at the expense of some battery. They've also introduced this mini capsule that only shows charging animations, data usage, and step stats for now. It's a cute little add-on at most. I mean, Realme UI has a lot of stuff. It's functionally packed, it's got a lot of features, you can have a lot of fun with it. It's just that you have to, clean it out at first, get rid of all the bloatware, turn off personalizations, and just take care of those ad recommendations. After that, it's good. And now let's talk about the cameras. Okay, so it's a dual camera setup. The primary lens is a 64 megapixel sensor with a large sensor that was also seen in the Realme GT Master Edition. And then there's a 2 megapixel black and white lens, and in the front you get an 8 megapixel sensor. But you know what? Let's quickly jump into the photo samples and let's just see how good the photography is on this thing. So here are some shots that I took using the regular 16 megapixel mode on this camera. And just by looking at the photos, there is no way you can say that these were shot using a budget smartphone that's about 10,000 rupees. In fact, this kind of photo quality is very close to what a lot of mid-range phones offer with their cameras. And seriously, I think the photos have come out really well. Captures the textures and details so well. It's got a very good natural shallow depth of field. You get a nice bokeh at the background. And guys, all of this is going to be available for you to download. So there's going to be a link in the description. Just download these pictures and evaluate the quality for yourself. But yes, when it comes to HDR capabilities getting tested, this is a budget phone. And of course, it's not an extremely powerful CPU which can handle HDR processing at that level. So yeah. Now there is a 64 megapixel mode, and if you see, it basically captures more details. So when you zoom in, you'll see it just retains more detail and more texture. Now let's talk about indoor photos. As long as the lighting is just about okay, the photo quality is fine. But as soon as the quality drops, as soon as it gets a little dim inside, you can see that details sort of get lost. If you see here, it couldn't even focus properly while it was indoors. So yeah, that's one thing that you have to take care of, that when you're shooting indoors, it's got to have some light. Now let's talk about low light. And while this photo looks fine, in majority situations, it didn't function too well. You can see that the noise is quite evident. It doesn't handle the extra lights too well. There's a lot of leak and even has issues focusing. But as soon as you switch to night mode, all of this actually gets better. So as you can see, again, not that great, but let's go into night mode photos. And you can see the difference. It is stark. There's a lot more sharpness. It's a lot more clear. The light is also handled pretty well. And yeah, just, the colors are better, and just overall the picture looks so much better in night mode. So in fact, you can use this for indoor photos as well. Now coming to portrait mode, the bag is a very simple subject to create a blur around using artificial intelligence. But look at this one. It's a difficult subject, or maybe even this one. And you can see that the edge detection didn't work too well. Coming to selfies, so it does have an 8 megapixel selfie camera, and the photos are fine. It may change skin tone a bit depending on lighting conditions, but in portrait mode, some photos were fine. The edge detection was quite good, like in this one. But there were situations, for example, under my ear, you can see in this one, as well as in this one, it just didn't detect the edge too well. Again, it's a budget phone, so edge detection can only work so well, but something to notice. In fact, within the portrait mode, there are quite a few inbuilt styles that you can choose from. And so here are some photos that I shot using street mode filters from the same spot of the same thing, and I think they look really good. And there is digital zooming options, so you can have 2x and 5x as additional options. Obviously, the quality keeps deteriorating as you zoom in more, and here are some samples for that. And finally, talking about video quality. So this can shoot up to 1080p videos in 60 FPS. And if you're shooting from one spot, not moving too much, just panning the smartphone, the videos look fine. It captures the colors well, responds to light pretty well for a phone that's at 10,000 rupees. But as soon as you start walking or running, obviously the stability goes for a toss, right? There's a lot of jerk, there's a lot of shake, and it's hard to minimize that when you're walking. So just something to keep in mind that, it's a good camera, but may not be handling shake very well. Again, at this price point, this is pretty decent. And lastly, let's talk about the battery on this thing. Now, I am super impressed that they've been able to, put in a 5000 mAh battery in a phone that's really slim. And 5000 mAh on this phone is going to be something else because the CPU is not very power hungry. The display is also not very power hungry. So there's really nothing that's draining the battery very fast. And that way, with moderate use, you can get 2 days easy. And in fact, you can go a little beyond 2 days. So yeah, that's that. Also, it comes with this 33-watt charger which charges this thing completely from 0 to 100 within 70 minutes, which is pretty good, right? I mean, what more do you need? So overall, I think budget phones have really started to nail quite a few things that you originally would only get in, mid-tier or premium smartphones. And the Narzo N55, I mean, it looks phenomenally good for this price point. It's got a great battery life. Realme UI is packed with features, and it's got a pretty decent set of cameras. The only things that I would improve are A, the speakers, B, a less intrusive, ad-free, bloat-free software experience, and a slightly better CPU with support for 5G. And then with all of this phone would be a killer in the 12,000 to 15,000 rupee range. Okay, so that's pretty much it, guys, about the Narzo N55. Now, if you guys have any questions, comments, put them down and I'll definitely reach out to you. And thanks a lot for watching, guys. If you found this helpful, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell notification icon. And mark all, really helps the channel grow. I'll see you guys in the next one.